Hey, how's it going? This video is going to be quite a bit different than my usual on location, in the field or yard photography videos. Partly is because I want to talk about a few things to do with the channel, and then also bring up a few notes about those kinds of videos and why you don't see very many of them. So throughout the video, I want to touch on a few different things. Hey, quick side note, at the bottom here, YouTube has chapters. If you're watching on something else, sorry, gotta look. But if you're on YouTube, you can use these chapters to skip around the different topics I talk about, though I bounce around between the topics just constantly, and they're not really segmented, so the chapters are kind of pointless now that I'm thinking about it. The first of that is going to be the concept of perfectionism in making any sort of content. If you're not, like a big name content creator, if you are a musician, a small time musician or something like that, you create something. It doesn't have to be like digital art, which I consider this, digital media or whatever. It doesn't have to be anything like that. But how you deal with perfection and motivation. The kind of branching off of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about inspiration. And that kind of stems from the fact that I've gotten a few messages from people that want to know what gear I'm using, which a lot of it or I comment on the videos, telling what I'm using. But a lot want me to do like these are my cameras, or this is like almost like review type of or showcase type of videos. And I'm sure I'll do that because I do love gear. I do think that we have an abundance of people that show off different equipment. I am definitely not one of those people that says your gear doesn't matter, because I feel like everyone knows what that means. Like when you say it, your gear doesn't matter, it matters, what you create or whatever. But I feel like that that phrase gets perverted quite a bit, and it can lead you astray. I do feel like it's helpful, and it's an important lesson that people need to learn. But I feel like when it's not nuanced and it's just kind of regurgitated out, then it can actually, you can lose out on the benefits that you can of adding some nuance to that. Now, on the inspiration portion, because everyone talks about inspiration, and it's really pretentious, especially like being the person speaking about inspiration, to talk about, what inspires you, what inspired this piece. So that's not what I'm wanting to go into. I'm not wanting to go into, well, this piece was inspired by this, and the reason I did this was because of this. I'm more so wanting to talk about the concept of inspiration, how you use it, and like what benefit it even has for you. Because I feel like there's probably tons of great works and things that people are proud of that they weren't necessarily inspired to do. It wasn't until after the fact that they, associated any, feeling toward it, or, intent or anything like that. So first of all, this is going to be the shortest topic, which is the concept of, or the phenomenon of perfectionism, in making videos, like I do. If you've watched the videos that I make, they're not, super high production. They're not complicated. It's pretty chill. There's not like a ton going on. I don't spend months, screenwriting, what's going to happen in the videos or whatnot. But that doesn't mean that they don't take a lot of work, and it takes a lot of more like mental energy to do them. And it's going to be the case for different people. You have somebody, a lot of your like famous YouTubers and stuff, to be successful in putting out content all the time it is straight up a job. Don't take it for granted thinking that, these people, are completely lucky, which they are. A lot of people are lucky to do it, but it does take not only the skill that you can learn doing it, but also the talent and being able to stay motivated. It's very, very tough. Different people have a gift for it. I don't. I'm a behind the camera guy. So what I am trying to do with my videos, even though there's like 6 or 7 of them, there's only like 3 or 4 on my YouTube channel. There's plenty of fantastic film and photography and videography related channels out there that are like great. And just because my channel does not resemble some and resembles others doesn't mean I have a direct affinity toward one versus the other. But really, my photography channel is it's my outlet. It's my therapy. Again, I'm going to say so many pretentious things throughout this whole video. It's going to hurt. And by the way, we're not getting through this video without jump cuts because my brain just shuts off every 30 seconds. Quite a few of you have commented or sent me messages specifically saying that you like the fact that I don't use music, or that I don't come at you like, hey, what's up, guys? Smash that like button, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, I don't come at you all extra. And I completely get that. I understand, you know what you're talking about, because like I've said that to other, content creators that I felt the same way toward. What I will say though, is I think probably the reason why you like, or maybe that works as far as, my videos are no music, no wacky sound effects or anything like that. Again, it all has its place. I'm not saying that I have, an objection toward any of that. I think the reason why that works, though, as far as the not having any music and it being a different vibe or whatever, is because my whole point of doing that isn't because I hate the other ones. It's because I'm trying to make the kind of videos that I look for on YouTube and want to see more of. And those videos that I kind of like am like completely ripping off that vibe have nothing to do with photography. One channel that I would say that's, very influential is called Nagualero. It's a bushcraft and like camping. He'd probably laugh if I said camping, but it's like an adventure-ish thing. But it's really authentic. There's no music other than when this dude like builds a flute and plays it out in the woods. I want to make content that makes other people feel the same way that kind of content makes me feel, in which I can fall asleep to it, yet be having a blast. This guy puts in so much work on his videos. It's crazy. If you've ever made any sort of content before, you'll realize how much work he actually puts in, because he's doing the bushcraft. He's doing all the extremely hard work that ends up, with him making these fantastic food, and ends up making, just a bunch of cool crap. But he has so many shots, and he has to, set the camera up, walk that direction, and then walk all the way back, pick the camera up, blah, blah, blah. He has 13 different camera angles for one action. So that action he was doing now takes like 13 times as long. And it's extremely impressive. As someone that does video production as their living, I'm extremely impressed. I'm working with cinema cameras, multi-crew shoots and stuff like that, and pre-planning shots that you already know what you're going to do, and then you end up having to execute all these different shots. He's more impressive than anything I've ever made. Like, I can say that, like, without a doubt. He is all vibe. Everything about his videos are vibe. The closest thing I would say that is actually like photography related, or in some way related to this, that has that vibe, is Morton Hilmer. If you haven't checked out Morton Hilmer, go check out his photography. His YouTube channel is fantastic. This dude is living the dream. If you ever got into photography and you're like, oh, I'm going to be a wildlife photographer one day. Oh, I'm going to be a landscape photographer. This dude is living the dream. Now, again, it's not to say that he's not, doesn't have his hardships and that he's not working really hard. But I think even, he would tell you, like, it's got to be awesome. It's cool. He's going on these, expeditions and all these, really cool places, and is really fine-tuned how in touch with nature he is and what he's getting out of it. At the end of the day, I'm not making the content with no music or, the wacky stuff for any, I guess, projected reason, as much as I am just trying to make content that I want to watch, because whether it's the most narcissistic thing in the world or not, my videos, once I make them, I'm not like some content creators where like I make it and I forget about it and, whatever. I make it and I watch it over and over and over and over, and I pay attention to every time that I would say something weird or that I feel like an edit could have been a little bit better. Even though it just seems like I throw these together and it looks like one big iMovie production, like I pay a lot of attention to them. The other thing I wanted to touch on is why you only see one of those videos every like once in a blue moon. And it's not because I don't shoot them, don't record them or anything, because I have. I actually have had 4 videos so far since the Mamiya broken winder video that I've just completely scrapped. And then, the last video that you saw on the channel, which is, when you are terrible at large format photography, is just part of one of those, one part of one scene of one of those. But I ended up scrapping them because I have this idea of what I'm wanting this video to be, what I'm wanting, it to accomplish, the kind of vibe I'm trying to create. And if it doesn't end up doing that, I get completely demotivated, and that I don't round it out. I don't finish it. Like I have a whole video just on using a Yashica D, and which has like really cool parts in it, I think. But because it wasn't perfect in my mind, I ended up scrapping it. And I think moving forward, a much more efficient and I guess enjoyable way of making content is that I kind of find some sort of bridge, and that may be what these kind of videos are, in which I can talk about this kind of stuff, or talk about a certain concept or a certain camera without making this full blown rounded out thing. Again, my videos are like really haphazard. At least they look it, but I'm like pouring my heart and soul into them because for me it is my therapy. Again, I do this for a living, so my entire point of doing all of this is this is my way to get away. This is my way to relax. This is it's my creative diet. It's a terrible way to say that, but so going forward, I'm going to try to make shorter. Not shorter. I'm not saying I'm going to be making like 30-second videos or whatever, but I guess simpler, not as long like Morton Hilmer Noguilero-esque videos to bridge the gap in between, because I feel like instead of trying to hone each video and get them absolutely perfect before I put them out, and they're not even that good to begin with, I should probably just make more content and then build upon it. I need to be okay with the idea that 3 years from now, looking back at some of my videos, that I'll cringe, rather than trying to make sure that in 3 years from now I don't cringe at my videos. So if you are, a musician or a photographer, or someone that makes video content or something like that, this isn't advice, because I'm not qualified to give advice on pretty much anything. But you can learn from me that the perfectionism, the seeking perfectionism and keeping yourself from like making anything, keeping yourself from uploading anything, is probably not the answer. There's probably a little bit more of some nuance and some balance in there. And that's what I'm going to try to do, going forward. By the way, I don't have any notes or anything. I'm just kind of going off the dome on these. So I'm sorry that, my speech is really scattered. The first thing I want to talk about is the concept that gear doesn't matter. That statement by itself is true and helpful and important for, some people to learn. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of us, fall into the trap of GAS or GAS, or gear acquisition syndrome, which I'm sure a lot of you have either heard or dealt with, or had a loved one that has dealt with this, which is that you constantly feel like, I'm not able to, reach my fullest potential. I don't want to be held back by my gear, so I got to get the next thing and the next thing, and it never ends. I am not immune to this. Look at that. Look at that right there. When people talk about the fact that gear doesn't matter, and they're what they mean is that if you don't learn the basics, and if you don't actually have something good, I guess metaphysically, or something that you're, a good story that you're trying to tell, then if you just keep on increasing the quality of the production, or keep on increasing the quality of the gear, it ain't going to help. It only helps so much. It doesn't really hold your gear doesn't hold your actual like creation and creativity back as much as your creativity can hold your gear back, if that kind of makes more sense. And I feel like it's important that once we develop and grow as, creators, man, I hate that word, that we learn that, or we have someone, tell that to us. Because I didn't, catch on to that concept until here recently. It wasn't because anyone really told me. It's because I had an epiphany one day. The main part that I think that it actually gets perverted is the fact that if you just latch onto the idea that gear doesn't matter, I don't need that thing because gear doesn't matter. I'm not worried about this piece of gear coming out or about getting this thing because gear doesn't matter. If you latch onto that and you hold on to that, that's the same phrase. Just said that twice. You can lose all the possible benefits that you can have. Really, if you're wanting to do wildlife photography and you're wanting to capture birds or a polar bear or something like that, please do not do that with a 35 millimeter lens. Don't do it with a 50 millimeter lens. Sure, we want to do landscapes and the birds way over there, sure. But if there's a specific thing that you want to do, every bit of this is just tools, and you do need the correct tools to do it. Just like you're not going to create or invent certain technologies using, just the wheel. You need other tools. So that completely makes sense why you'd need, certain lenses to be able to, get into certain things. You need telescopes if you want to be able to take a picture of, nebula or something like that. So that's that's one benefit of gear or whatever. But something that's not as obvious that I want to touch on is the fact that you can switch from shooting in a different format. So such as, we're used to 3x2, 2x3, whatever it's referred to as, or 16:9 on video. And you can just switch to like a square format, and it will completely change how you operate. It'll completely change how you operate. A lot of people got their start, in which I really got my start in the DSLR, the small DSLR age of the late 2000s, early 2010s. I seem a lot older than I am. I'm 24. Or I seem a lot younger. I don't know. A lot of people think I'm 30. But I actually got my start in photography on film. And it wasn't one of these I'm going to use a film camera instead. I never had an art class. I never had anything related to art growing up. I didn't have a lick of it. I had a family of musicians. It didn't really translate that much, as I wanted nothing to do with music or anything like that. But I know the guitar kind of contradicts that, but whatever. But I see a lot of photographers, they'll start out as this one thing, and it painting or something, or drawing or something like that, and it transfers over, or they'll start as, I don't know, something else artistic and bleed over. But really, I didn't have any sort of inspiration other than my grandfather had a Minolta X700, and I asked him if I could use it one day. So this is the Minolta X700, and I think I was 7, 8, or something like that. And he, I guess, not using the camera very much, it had all the bells and whistles that came with the X700 at the time.
If you're ready for high-performance photography, the Minolta X700 program system is ready for you. Computerized, motorized, systematized, total capability, from fully programmed where you said nothing, even with flash, to creative manual where you control everything. The high-performance Minolta X700, voted camera of the year on 2 continents.
The X700 had a bunch of accessories and all. They had a power, auto winder and all that. It's pretty neat. So I used it, and immediately, not knowing how film works or anything like that, because I've seen people use little Kodak point and shoots and stuff like that as a little kid. I just burst through those 36 shots or 24 or whatever it was. And my mom went and got them developed, and I came back, and there was one photo out of all of them where I could see something.
Only from the mind of Minolta.
And it was maybe the edge of a window, because Obviously, I don't understand how exposure works, or any of the fundamentals of photography or cameras work or anything like that. So then I really had some questions. So from that, like I learned how to use that camera, not really connecting that to the fundamentals of photography or anything. I learned how to use that camera to actually make it like an image come out. And I thought it was pretty neat. I really loved the feeling of timing, getting a photo. It felt like a sniper or something like that. And you think this would lead on to me being a National Geographic wildlife photographer, but no. Later on, like everyone else, I ended up getting, well, actually, before that, I ended up using a Nikon, is it D90? 90D? No, D90? I think it's D90. But I used that camera. And that camera was absolute trash, but great at the same time. It was amazing using it. I thought that, it was the coolest thing ever to be able to use a camera that was that nice. But it would overheat a lot. I was shooting a show in a parking lot one time, and it would literally, I had to wear a glove because it would like almost melt down in my hand. And then from that, I moved on to a T3i, like everyone else did. And that really got not only my start in photography, but video. I kind of got into video the same way that everyone else would, other than the fact that I did have small video cameras. In between that time, I had the X700 and the T3i or whatever. But my photography did not really change from that time that I didn't really get any photos out of the X700 to the time I had the T3i. What really made the big difference, the big change, is one day my dad, I don't remember if he brought it up or if I brought it up, but there was some sort of challenge where you tape over the front of you tape over your screen so you can't see any of your exposures. You can't see any of your pictures. And then you go out and you take 36 shots, right? So you get 36 shots, so you're basically simulating you shooting on film. And you can't shoot in auto or anything like that, or not even aperture priority, shutter priority, or anything like that. And that's what I did. I really got a feeling for looking at something and having a vague idea of what my exposure settings should be. So from that, I then went on to try different other ways of like gamifying myself, because they made the photos feel, more substantial. The other thing I did was I could take as many shots as I wanted to, but I had to delete every one of them but 10. And I gave myself a time limit. So if I would go to everything that I possibly could. If someone was going down to a swap meet, or someone was going to a gravel pit, I'd want to go. And I'd go and hop in the car with them, and I'd give myself an hour. So I had an hour. I could take as many pictures as I want to. I'd burn through 1,000 photos, that poor shutter. And then I could only keep 10. And that ended up making, I had the combination of figuring out why I liked different photos versus other ones, because I had to trash them. And then the other was figuring out, when to actually hit the shutter, because I can't waste any because I only have 36 shots. And that was one of the most important things. That's how I got my start in photography and everything. But later on, I, working as a photographer, actually getting jobs and everything, I quickly realized that working as a photographer in this day, where you're going to make your money is in client-based stuff. Obviously, duh. But it's a service industry rather than like art, like fine art. It's not that. So if you're going to be making your money, it's going to be for like weddings and like senior photos and stuff like that. And what I realized is, and this may be different in different regions, what I realized is that most people don't know the difference between, a great photo and a good one or whatever. But they don't need to, because it's not what they're wanting. It's not what they're paying for. But because of that, most people don't actually care what their photos look like. They really care that they had the feeling of hiring a photographer. They like the interactions with the photographer. They want that. That's what they're paying for. The photos are just almost a bonus. or they're just like a verification that they paid for the service. So each region, each area, especially in like really small towns, I grew up in a town of 288 people. There's always the photographer, and they got everything capped. Like they have all the business, and it doesn't matter if their photos are better than yours or better or whatever. It doesn't matter the relative quality of them. It matters that they hired that person. Moms and uncles and whatever like to brag that they hired the photographer. And I realized because of that because I connected so much with photography, because it was so personal. That's the only thing that's been really, personal, that I could not do it. I'd get burnt out. There's one year that I shot like 21,000 photos at my old job. Realized I was completely burnt out on photography. And a lot of it, was because of the kind of photography that I was doing. They just needed a picture of something. They didn't care if it was award-winning or just good, because, again, they don't need to. But my actual day-to-day now is in video, which is much, much different for me. I guess conceptually it's not that much different as far as the end product or whatever, but I've realized that I can work in video all day long. It's a mission. I go after it. I produce content, blah, 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 blah. I could do it as a job all day. Photography, not so much. It's much more specific, and I can only really do it if it's in the fine art sense. Now, I don't mean that I'm producing fine art, but in the sense of it's not just completely service-based, that you want my photo because you want my photo. Or you want that one. If you never knew it was for me, you want that one. Or you want it because, the story of, what went into it or whatever. Everybody's going to have their, their own reason that they are able to do whatever their hobby or whatever it is. And that's mine for photography. At one point, I really loved photography. I was always researching about it and always practicing and always coming up with little games to, try to improve myself. But at some point I was completely burnt out. I didn't want to look at a camera. It would literally irk me. I would get stressed out hearing that someone else was taking a photo. Completely burnt myself out in every way. And a lot of that had to do with I had filled myself up so much with work that I did not allow. And when I say allow, I'm going to touch on this in a second, didn't allow myself to creatively or have a creative outlet for the photography. Do it because I wanted to do it because I thought something was cool, regardless of what anyone else thought. Later on, I learned how important it is to force yourself to make something that is only because you want to make it. That's only because you're wanting to make something that you would look at that don't exist in the world already. Which is what this YouTube channel is about. I didn't change shirts. You changed shirts. This is the next day. It started raining really bad. That messed up my sound and everything, and I completely forgot what I was talking about. So while the lighting's different and I'm wearing a different shirt, I'm going to try to pick back up where I was. And I'm pretty sure I was talking about inspiration, and at the time I was talking about gear. Like a lot of people that get into film photography, I started out in film, so I learned photography in the same way that film photographers learn photography, which is different than, if you just pick up a DSLR and you've never gotten a photography before, or say you start on your phone, it's not that one's better than the other, but it's completely different avenues for how you learn photography and what you pay attention to first and what your building blocks are. Like most people, after getting burned out in photography and whatnot, and it kind of losing its spark or whatever, I reignited my flame. This is the cringiest way to say this, for photography through film. A lot of people do that. And I think a lot of that, it's different for different people. Some people like the aesthetic or the vibe of film. And while that is cool, it's not so much what it is for me as far as why I do it, why I prefer shooting film. As far as if I'm going to be doing photography, I could only do, one, I would do film. But the reason is because you can take a fantastic photo that everyone loves, that someone wants to buy. whatever. That feeling is never as good as when you take a photo that you already pre-visualized in your head that you wanted to take, or even if you didn't see the photo, you knew what you were trying to capture, and then you captured it. And then once you captured it, it turned out, how you wanted it to. Extending on from that, it's on film. It's even more, I guess, powerful, because you have the opportunity to not only take the photo in the way that you want to take it, but you need to choose the film stock that you think would be appropriate for this. And then if you're going to, develop it, you gotta know, I'm going to make a decision on how I'm going to develop this film. And if I don't do that right, then it's all for naught. And if I don't have the correct film stock or whatever, this isn't, whether this doesn't need to be in color, or this film stock doesn't support the dynamic range of the shot, or the speed, or, whatnot, then it's all for naught. So instead of having this one-dimensional or like two-dimensional process of pre-visualizing a photo, it goes into choosing a film stock, being able to pre-visualize from, how you've shot on that film before, knowing how you're going to develop it, whether you're going to push it or pull it, or if it's expired, or, whatever. And then also if you're going to end up printing it, or if you're going to scan it and do something else with it, then going all the way to print. Someone that explains this way better than I do is Nick Carver, which if you've seen my videos, I guarantee that you've seen Nick Carver. If there is a rabbit hole of photography, I'm down there with the oil. He talks a lot about making sure that, you get your work printed.
But it's true. It's important to print.
Because that visceral feeling of knowing that now something exists that you had even more of a hand in, that you had to not only understand the fundamentals, but you didn't really have an opportunity to mess up. So when you got that final photo, even though it may just seem mundane to someone else, you had a hand in it every step of the way. If it's got a light leak, or if it's got a scratch, or if there's glare, or if there's something else in it, you had a hand in that too. So you connect to your photos a lot more, and it's not necessarily, but just because of the vibe of it being on film or whatnot. On that note, I've always preferred the slow, methodical shooting, not only in photography but also in my video work. I've always preferred not going in and taking a bunch of photos and like being in the moment, which I completely get, how that's fun or fulfilling. Being in the moment, say like concert photography or wildlife or something like that, and almost like a sniper feeling for it, kind of how I was talking about earlier. I've always preferred the slower, methodical, pre-visualized way of shooting. Not in any way do I think it's superior or anything like that. But the process of, say, like if you're doing a landscape photo, or like a photo of a building, which I would almost consider landscape or somewhat architectural, if it's just like some old building or something like that. Scouting, knowing that if I'm going to take this, I want to take it in the right weather. I know which direction the sun needs to, be shining from, or which way it needs to be facing the sun or whatever. I've had shots before where I have purposely waited a couple months until it's in a different season. Even though it looks cool now, I just know that what I'm feeling from the shot, what I'm seeing in it, in the pre-visualized form, exists within a different season, different colors, different mood, whatnot. So I've always preferred that kind of shooting, and shooting on film just exaggerates that, especially since Kodak and Ilford and all of you just keep raising your prices and gouging the crap out of all of us. I see some photographers who see the prices going up and they're like, oh, this is good for film photography because it means that, so many people are buying film or whatnot. But nope, I have absolutely no sympathy. I have absolutely no sympathy at all on the manufacturers, because they know they're gouging. They know they're gouging because when film is almost dead and it's super scarce, and you reduce the supply on everything, I completely get raising your prices a little bit so that you can increase production. But there becomes a point where you increase it so much, you completely kneecapped an entire portion of the market that would be getting into it. I get that all of us that were already going to do it, no matter if it ends up costing $100 a sheet, would stay in it or whatever. But you completely kill the people that, would be getting into it for a couple dollars, like a couple dollars a roll rather than like $8 a roll. Or okay, now I get they've discontinued Velvia, but I got some Velvia 50, 35 millimeter Velvia 50, and it's going for like $17 to like $25. Ridiculous. Well, I mean, that's a discontinued film. I get like Pro 400H, going up or whatnot, but like Portra. If Portra goes away, like that's the sign of the end times. So Portra's not going away. It doesn't make any sense. Again, if it's going away, it's a sign of the end times, which some would say that, Pro 400H going away is that sign. Portra. And it keeps going up. Like right now, it's like $50 a box. $50 a box. It's ridiculous. The 4x5 sheets, $45 for 10 sheets of Ektar. It's goofy. I don't know how I got on the conversation of film prices, but I really do feel like as the film prices go up, we're completely adding another possibility of film dying off. And it just seems like greed, capitalistic greed. Like the supply and the demand the balance is not making any sense. Like I don't shoot as much. On top of planning out to the bitter end each shot, I don't shoot as much on 4x5 because I don't have any more kidneys to sell. I can just imagine how you 8x10 people are feeling. Like, seriously. How can you even get a loan anymore? People thinking like, oh, why don't you get some other film? I would totally get some other film if it existed. I'm only shooting it when something really important is going on, and it shouldn't be that case. And for the people out there that are like, it's an expensive hobby, and that's the barrier to entry. That's the freaking point. You shouldn't want the barrier to entry to be that thick. If you want, people to get into this and it to grow, and for people to realize that that the film has its place. I'm getting way too controversial for this type of talking video. The main thing that I actually want to talk about and how you can draw inspiration from things that have nothing to do with what you're doing. There's a lot of writers and directors and stuff like that draw inspiration from, say, like music videos or paintings, or something like that, and that kind of makes more sense. But you don't hear too often of people, say, like photographers or cinematographers, stuff like that draw inspiration from, say, music. Now, I get like, oh, I like to turn on, this music while I'm working or whatever. That's not what I mean. I mean like having music that creates a certain vibe in your head, and that you can figure out some way to reach out, like within yourself, and recreate that vibe, like a different room of it. If that world exists only when you listen to this music, or you look at this painting or whatever, if that world exists, and then through your medium that's completely unrelated, you're able to create another area, create another level of that same environment. I feel like that is what more so what people are talking about when they're talking about inspiration. It's like you're expounding upon an environment that's created within your own psyche, your own head. You can draw inspiration from, unlikely areas, unlikely mediums, things you wouldn't think would go hand in hand, whether it be, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, I think, there was, before you had like Stieglitz and Ansel Adams and stuff, you had photographers that they based all their fundamentals of composition and tone and everything really based on other fundamentals that had already been made in the art world, which means paintings. So you'd have very painterly looking photos. It almost sounds like I'm talking about it in a negative way, which I don't think it is. But Ansel Adams, and I believe Stieglitz as well, but because I'm not sure about Stieglitz, I'm only going to refer to Ansel Adams in this way. But Ansel Adams, he made the big push to say that for photography to be its own thing, for it to be its own art form, it can't be piggybacking on another art form's fundamentals or whatever. That you shouldn't be basing your photos or how you think about photography, how you view it, how you consume it or make it based on what we know about paintings. Basically trying to make something look like a painting. And some people misconstrue that in thinking that, you shouldn't make stuff look like a painting with your, with your photography. That's painting. That's not photography. That's not what you're going for. And it's not necessarily, what he's talking about. I don't think the way that I interpret that is that whether it was paintings or whether it was something else, that photography to be its own art, for it to actually be an art form in the popular culture, then we need to be focusing on making photos for purely photographic reasons rather than trying to mimic, what we see in paintings and whatnot. Now, obviously, there's going to be, some like mathematical or like psychological reasons why we, prefer certain compositions that, we ended up figuring out in paintings that we end up also doing in photographs or whatever. But if you're doing, photography, say for Ansel Adams, at least, he found, the way to do that was, I'm feeling this when I'm in this place. This thing makes me feel this way. I'm here looking at it. And you can't be here. You're not here. But I'm going to try to capture, not what it looks like, not what the thing looks like from me being here and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to capture the way that looking at it makes me feel using the thing that I'm actually taking the photo of. So, I mean, we could get super, metaphysical with this and say like, I looked at that camera back there and it made me feel this way. So now I'm take a picture of this tree and somehow use that to make you feel the same way that I felt looking at that. You could do that. That happens all the time, like in photos. But he was wanting to, specifically because, he was big on nature and conservation and whatnot. He was really wanting to show off the majesty, I guess you could call it, of, these different parts of nature, different parts of, the earth. And not necessarily in a showcasing way, but showing the feeling of seeing that. And I feel like Ansel Adams is referred back to as basically like it was that, and Stieglitz was the breaking point or the wall that we broke through in photography that, turned it into its own art form, which I would agree with, and is kind of doing what I'm talking about as far as doing photography for its own thing and not trying to just mimic another art form or whatever. Though, where say like Ansel was doing that, with these, monoliths and with these trees or, just, bits of land or whatever. And it was about, him being there and being in tune with it and feeling like he could capture it because he was so in tune with it. I tend to do that subconsciously with certain music. There is, I think certain people, not certain people, I think it just depends on like the category of how you consume media. But some people listen to music and it's more mathematical. They're like, I like this because it makes me feel this way. And there's some people that create other environments in their head when they listen to, to certain music. And I do that a lot. Like, music has a very big effect on my mood because I can't separate myself from the environment or the ambiance of, whatever's created. Now, not just the mood of like, oh, I'm listening to thrash metal, so like I want to, jump on someone's shoulders and rip their head off. Like it's not, that necessarily, but more so that you think that, this music exists within this timeline and this storyline, and I can almost world build inside my own brain. And then, like I said earlier, you can continue on in your photography using a completely different medium to create another room of that area. I would say one of my main influences you won't see it in my photos. You won't be like, oh, I completely see what you did there, Luke. But something that it changed the way that I go about feeling the photo is my favorite painter. Which is funny because we're getting back to mimicking painting and whatnot, which I don't try to mimic this guy's paintings because I can't. I don't think there's any way to. But it's my favorite painter, and I've wanted to talk about him for a while. And again, mainly on the topic of drawing inspiration from not only mediums that you don't think that you would, draw inspiration from for this medium, but also unlikely tones, unlikely subjects that end up influencing something else. I say I try, it's more so I'm just trying to show what I'm feeling. And usually I'm feeling, like whatever the beauty of this thing is. Again, no matter how haphazard, the photos actually end up looking. But I really enjoy, and what, gives me the most fulfillment is doing that with things that you would not think have any like beauty to them, or would almost be depressing. And there was some like old Russian poem about how, like we think of the idea of hope as being like, I know today's bad, but I have hope because I know that tomorrow will be better. And I completely forgot the Russian poem, but it's basically that instead of finding comfort in hope, in that way, you completely get rid of the idea of hope. You have comfort and solace knowing that today is bad, but I am comfortable and I'm put at ease and I am at peace knowing that tomorrow is going to be worse. And that just breaks your brain, the first time you hear it, or at least it did to me. But really it's about knowing your situation and having all of the, scary parts of it assessed and going ahead and coming to terms, with yourself and your situation, being able to understand it, and you finding peace that way. Again, I'm probably not only butchering the poem, but also misinterpreting it. But that's what I gathered from it. And I connect with that. It feels really basic to have this guy as your favorite painter, even though he has such an odd name, and you probably haven't heard his name, but I guarantee that you've seen his work before, or you've definitely seen his influence before, which is Zdzisław Beksiński. Sorry if I butchered that. His paintings are known as the quintessential idea of dystopia, what we associate a lot with dystopia, or like Forgotten Cities or Apocalypse and Holocaust. And even if it's not talking about, the actual Holocaust, but like the futuristic dystopian concept of Holocaust. So it's just all around known to be this scary doom-esque. That's the overarching feeling is doom. That's not what I get from his paintings at all. I feel this like overwhelming feeling of calm, like within the first couple seconds of looking at his paintings. And the greatest things about his paintings to me aren't necessarily the subject itself, but how he handles tone, how he handles color palettes, and if the color palettes have meaning, which in anyone that's ever theorized about his paintings definitely say that his color palettes have a predetermined meaning. I feel like it's important to point out before we continue on, and this is for any art history buffs that are watching, that I'm completely aware that G Suave's most famous quote is "Meaning is meaningless to me." The full quote is meaning is meaningless to me. I do not care for symbolism, and I paint what I paint without meditating on a story. So if I insinuate any way that he meant to do anything, I don't mean to contradict the man himself. I more so mean we're kind of suspecting that he meant something. And a reason, especially the color blue, which you can look into that, or maybe I can talk about that, in another video or something like that. So how he deals with tones, and not necessarily his method, but like how he decides it, how he thinks about it. These paintings are like, oh, how the crap did you come up with, the idea to do it like that is amazing. But then also, the most influential thing, I think, is his sense of scale. This guy can have one subject, one thing in his photo, or two, well, let's just say one, and have nothing else relative in it. And you somehow already get the sense of scale. He can make something look gigantic, like absolutely gargantuan, next to nothing, next to the background. So because of that, the scale that he creates from his main subject, and it's in this environment, it almost makes the atmosphere itself have scale, that you can almost know the size of the particles in the air that this thing is in, which is nuts to me. And I constantly try to find things that give me the same sense that this guy does. And I know that, for some of you that see it, that you'll see his paintings as all doom and gloom and that's it. But that's not what I, get out of it at all. But I need to do a whole video just on G Suave because it just makes me happy. I'm hoping that videos like this, that I can do more videos like this, and may end up, doing some like Q&A type stuff. But I'm thinking this would be a good way to bridge the gap in between my long, on location videos, and they're therapeutic for me because I'm able to talk about the things that are just on my mind that I don't have anybody to talk to about because they're really niche, especially G Suave. But I guess I'll end this, and I'm not sure if I'm just going to call this a video series or a video podcast or what. If you have ideas for names or any ideas, let me know. But what I will say is if you have any questions or things you would like me to talk about in the next time I do this, let me know. It would help a ton, even if it's just the simplest thing. It can give me a jumping off point to be able to break into other topics. But I just wanted to recommend to everybody that it should be the very first thing you do if you get into photography. I didn't do it till way, way later, which is get, into the basics. I learned the basics and whatever, but really trying to understand why the crap they exist in the first place. And the very first thing I would do is get this book or this series of books, or, just find some way to read it or whatever. Ansel Adams, it has the camera, the negative, and oh my God, what's the other one? Oh my God, what is it? Oh, the print. It's on the back. But yeah, so the camera, the negative, and the print, and because what he goes through in these books is the basics. Like you learn everything you need to know about the basics in here. Maybe not necessarily how to use them, like specific methods or whatever, but you'll know how photography works and all the different mediums, what the purposes of all the actual gear is. But I highly recommend, even if you've been doing photography for 20, 30 years or whatever, if you haven't, read these books or, study him or Stieglitz or someone else, even if you're not into landscape photography or anything in and of itself, just for these little nuggets here. And I just want to read you one thing that kind of like hit me. If I can find it. All right, I found it. On the note of, in the book, The Camera, it's in the section about small format cameras or 35 millimeter cameras. I feel like this is a way more delicate and more eloquent way of describing what I was talking about earlier with gear not mattering. This is really what I mean, and I feel like the nuance that should be added. In here, he says, the average photographer is expected to be content with a relatively high percentage of acceptable exposures achieved on a purely automatic basis. The common or average photographer, so like the average person is going to be, taking photos, not necessarily like a professional or anything like that, concerned with like your hit rate. How many usable photos did you get or whatever? And he says, I firmly believe, however, that there is no avoiding the need to master the equipment and the process if you hope to create intense images that are consistently above the average. Let's see, it's said way better than I could ever put together. But like little nuggets like that, I feel like, are good enough reason to go ahead and read these books. In selecting a camera, you should be fully aware of its capabilities, including the advantages and limitations of automation. But I certainly recommend avoiding those that do not allow you to override the automatic functions when the circumstances warrant. Yeah. So yeah, good book. Thanks for watching. I guess I'll see you next time. I'm actually thinking that when I do this next, I'm not going to be at my desk. I'm going to be over there on the couch because it's a lot more comfortable, and I feel like I'll be able to talk a lot better. Also, too, I'm going to do something completely different with this microphone because, one, the shadow is bugging me. The lights are, not great for what I'm wanting. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully the next video is something to do with photography. See ya.